there, my name is Zoe, and in this video, I'm going to be giving you some tips to help you memorize dance choreography or combinations. So, while I am a belly dancer and most of my videos are focused on belly dance specific technique and tips, this video really applies to pretty much any kind of dance. So even if you are not a belly dancer, these tips should be very helpful for you if you have problems memorizing choreography. And it's very important to be able to memorize choreography quickly and well, because we can't really work on giving the movements life and emotion and all of that unless we actually know what those movements are and what order they come in. I also, once upon a time, was terrible at memorizing choreography, and by using these methods, I improved a lot. It really helped me, and I hope that these tips will help you too. So let's jump right in. The first tip that I have for you is to write things down. This is super important. It's so helpful with helping you learn movements, picking them up. I recommend writing down everything, every class, every workshop. When you're done with the class, go home, or even if you can write after class, that's even better. Get a notebook and write down everything you can remember, all the combinations, all the choreography. If it was a workshop or even in a class where you were able to take a video, that's great. But then take that video and write down the choreography from the video. Yeah, because a lot of the times we take the video and then we think, okay, we have it there, so we don't really need to learn it that well, or we think we'll just look at the video and somehow it will magically, get solidified in our brains. But that's not how it works. We need to do that work to get the choreography into our memory. And writing things down I found is so helpful. And I recommend really actually using a notebook and writing it by hand. I know it could be maybe tempting to use your phone or go to a computer and type it, it would be faster, but I just find that you don't learn it as well when you do that. I mean, you can try it, maybe it works for you. But for me, the thing that works best is really forcing myself to write everything down. And even if I go a bit slower, that means that I'm spending that time thinking about those movements and really ingraining it into my memory as I'm writing it down. And you also have a bit more freedom because you can, do little drawings, or with formatting, you'll have a bit more freedom writing things down. So I really recommend that. And that's kind of the how, when to do it. Don't do it during the class itself or the workshop, because you want to be fully present during that time, to be soaking up as much as you can. So if you're going to write things down, then you'll be missing out on other things. But I recommend doing it immediately after class is the best time. But of course, we can't always, get out our notebooks immediately after class. You might need to go do something else. So really, as soon after as you can, but any time that day is okay. Just make sure you write it down before you go to sleep. Because once you go to sleep and then wake up the next day, a lot of what you learned will just be gone if you didn't take the time to write it down during that day. So, tip number 1, write it down. Okay, tip number 2, and this kind of goes with the writing it down, is have a system. What I mean by this is you should know all the movements that appear in the dance, and if you don't know them, make up a name for those movements. So some forms of dance, maybe pretty much every movement has a very codified name and it's very clear. Other forms of dance, including belly dance, are not so codified. There are some movements that everyone uses the same name, so we do this movement, pretty much everyone is going to call this a camel, everyone's going to call this movement a Maya, but there are other movements that either just don't seem to have a name, or there's like 100 different names, you hear all sorts of different names. And in those cases, just make up your own name or pick a name and use that so that you always have one name you associate with that movement. So like this movement here, right? This is a very common belly dance movement. And I call this movement a fish. Why do I call it a fish? Because the first time I was introduced to this movement was in a workshop, and the teacher, I think, called it a fish, but maybe he didn't even call it a fish, maybe he meant something else, but that's what I took. And I just, as soon as I write fish, I know exactly what the movement is. I don't need to write, okay, I'm traveling and pushing my opposite hip up and out. I mean, that's way too much detail. You want to have a name and a movement so you can easily access your store of movements in your writing and in your memory, and it will just make life a lot easier when trying to memorize choreographies. So have a system, make up names for movements that don't have them, and yeah, if you can be creative with your names, that's even better because then you're more likely to remember them. Okay, so tip number 3, and this is actually applies to memorizing basically everything. So not even just dance, but anything. This tip is find the pattern. So this is so helpful for memorization. Because to memorize something, we basically need to get that combination of choreography into our long-term memory, right? So then we can retrieve it the next time we need to perform it. To get it into our long-term memory, first we need to get it into our short-term memory. So the short-term memory is where we would just memorize something really quickly, and then either it goes into our long-term memory, and that's what, say, like the writing things down and whatnot will help with, or maybe we don't need it after a minute, so we forget it. And researchers have done lots of studies and have found that in our short-term memory, most people can hold 7 plus or minus 2 items of information. So, as an example, let's say I tell you I'm going to give you 7 numbers and I want you to repeat them back to me. So I'm going to say 8, 6, 1, 0, 5, 2, 7. So, probably you are able to repeat those numbers back to me. That was 7 numbers. We can hold 7 numbers in our short-term memory. Now I'm going to give you a few more numbers, and let's see if you can repeat them back. So, let's see. 9, 3, 6, 5, 8, 0, 2, 2, 4, 7, 8, 3, 1, 5, 7. So, I would be incredibly impressed if you could repeat all of those 14 numbers back, because it's too much. We can't hold that much information in our short-term memory. But now, I'm going to give you another group of 14 numbers. So, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And I bet you can repeat those back, no problem at all. And why is that? I mean, the first group was 14 numbers. This was another group of 14 numbers. It's because there's a pattern. There's an easily noticeable pattern in the second group. So you're not memorizing 14 different numbers. All you're memorizing is, okay, it was a sequence increasing by 1 that was 7 digits long. So that's like 2 pieces of information to memorize. Started on 1, and then the next sequence started on 2. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So you'll need to really remember kind of like 3 or 4 pieces of information, and suddenly you've memorized a whole string of 14 numbers, and we can make it even longer. I can say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and suddenly you've memorized 21 numbers just like that. So the point of that is that in dance, it's the same idea. If you are focusing on too much detail and kind of too small of an area, it's just going to be completely overwhelming, and there's no way you'll be able to memorize everything. But if you're able to find the patterns, and there almost always are patterns to be found, then you will be able to memorize so much more and so much more quickly. So what sort of patterns do I mean? Well, they could be spatial patterns, like we do one combination to the right and then we do it to the left. I mean, that's super easy, right, to think about. But they could also be numerical patterns, like say I do 3 of one movement, 3 hip drops, and then a chest drop. 1, 2, 3, drop. And maybe I do that on one diagonal, and then I do it to the other diagonal, and then maybe I do 3 mayas. 1, 2, 3, roll up. 1, 2, 3, roll up. So that's like, I don't know, 16 different movements overall, but it's really only 4 different movements: hip drops, chest drops, mayas, roll up. And it's just this 3-in-1 pattern, alternating right and left. And going beyond that, actually, we can think that a hip drop is kind of like a Maya, just the Maya is a bit more smooth. So I'm using the same parts of my body even. Also the chest drop and the roll up are both ending in my chest. So there's a lot of similarities in those movements. There are patterns there that we can find. And depending on your type of dance and on the choreography, the patterns may be different, but they will be there. So look for the patterns, get used to trying to find them, and that will help you a lot with memorization. Okay, tip number 4, and this actually goes hand in hand with finding the patterns. This is to analyze other works, other choreographies. So this can be a choreography you've learned in a workshop, for example, that maybe you've written down and you've learned it, but go back and actually analyze it. Like, go through in detail and notice where there are repetitions or where there are kind of rhyming combinations. Really try to understand what the choreographer is doing. That will help you so much to understand how choreographies are built. If you don't have a workshop choreography, pick a video that you really like and go through that video, analyze it, write down everything that's going on, and then really try to work out, which sections are which, where are there repetitions, where are there themes, things like that. And that's super helpful, not just for memorization, but that can also really help with technique and musicality and so much analyzing other works, right? I mean, like, painters learning to paint will often repaint works by masters. So for dance, why not the same thing? Find a choreography you love or dance you really love and really study it and try to understand what's behind it. Because understanding what's behind the choreography will then help choreographies in general make sense, and you'll be able to memorize them faster. Okay, tip number 5. This tip is especially helpful if you're in this situation. Let's say you are learning a choreography in a workshop, you're learning like a whole song, and there's a whole bunch of different sections, and usually, like, anytime one section starts, as soon as you got that first move of the section, you're fine. So like, let's say you have something like here, back, and then some turns. Yeah, and then maybe we do it the other way, and like, as soon as you got that first chassé off to the side, everything else comes flowing back. And then let's say we have another section where we're doing some hip drops. Yeah, and like a circle, just as an example. And as soon as you do the hip drops, again, you can continue, you do the circle, you do whatever comes next, and it's all flowing. But the problem comes right here, right? We do our turn, and turn. And then you're frozen. Like, what comes next? Is it the hip drop section? Is it, I don't know, maybe there's a 8 section, maybe there's a camel section. You can never remember which section comes after which. And so this tip helps so much in those situations, which is find the transition. So transitions are so important, and they don't get nearly as much attention as they should because there's just so much to focus on that a lot of times they get a bit lost. But when you're learning choreography, notice the teacher will I mean, they should be doing a transition between the movements, but a lot of times they don't mention it because it's just, like I said, there's just too much to talk about and the transition gets lost in the shuffle. But as an example, let's say we did the pivot turns. Yeah, and then after that is when the hip drops come. But again, when we're in this position, the next move could be anything. So, look to see what the instructor is doing, or if you can't, or you don't really see what they're doing, make the transition yourself. So, you know you have to go from here into a hip drop. So already, instead of just coming to a neutral position and then coming into your hip drop position, turn that last pivot turn into the start of the hip drop, right? So we come, instead of coming to face front, I start facing diagonal. I'm bringing my arms into the hip drop position. I'm straightening my leg. And when I'm here, I have no choice but to do a hip drop, right? If I'm here, I'm not going to do a vertical 8. So make it easy for yourself by forcing yourself into the next movement, yeah? So with transitions, weight, arms, super important. Yeah, there's so much to talk about with transitions. But the important point is to link the end of one section to the beginning of the next section with a transition. Okay, and the last tip, tip number 6, is know your music. Because almost always the dance comes on top of the music. We are expressing the music with the dance. And if you know the music, then you already have a map in your head of what is going to happen next, and the movements should make a lot more sense, and it will be a lot easier to memorize them. So if you can get access to the music, that's really important, or if you took a video, you can use that as the music. And if you want to know how to analyze music for dance, I made a whole video about that, which I will link in the description box below, going into a lot of detail of how to really break down a song and understand it in a way that then helps you dance to it. So knowing the music can really help memorizing choreography as well. So those were some tips to help you memorize dance choreography. Again, just to recap, the first tip was to write it down. Second one is have a system, have names for the movements. Third tip, find the patterns. Fourth tip, analyze other videos or other choreographies. Fifth tip, know your transitions. And sixth tip, know your music. So I really hope that this video was helpful for you and that it will help you memorize choreographies quicker and better in the future. If you enjoyed this video, please do give it a like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. If you have other tips that you found to help you memorize choreographies, I would love to hear them. Feel free to share in the comments below. Thank you so much for watching and happy practicing.